is to benefit, promote, and/or further the interests of the criminal gang. Alan's cousin Mango is a documented gang associate of the group ATK, according to police. Investigators say an ongoing feud between the two gangs led to the death of Charles Jones, also known as Julio Fulio, last year. Following Jones's death, Mango released a song called Six Ways to Die, featuring another rapper who police say is also a gang member of ATK. In the song, Mango disses several Six Block members who have died and references a photo that members of the Six Block took at a gravesite. This brings us to the day Allen lost his life. After the shooting took place, a witness called 911 and told them that they saw the suspects flee the scene in a black car. From there, investigators began canvassing the area, recovering video from nearby businesses. Hours later, they found the suspect's car, which was a black Kia where a BMW met them after the shooting. Investigators searched the black Kia where they found a match to the spent rifle casings found at the scene. The following day, detectives requested cell phone data from the location of the murder and where the black Kia was found. Records reveal the data showed the four suspects were at both locations. Detectives also learned that the BMW involved belonged to one of the suspects' family members. Cell phone data and video surveillance connected the four men accused of Allen's death at the scene of the shooting. DSO says more arrests could be expected in this case. We're now reporting Alicia Hatcher, Channel 4, the local station.
He was 7. He didn't deserve it. He was a kid. And these thugs mowed him down. Well, let me add this. Do you know why you haven't heard of this story? If you haven't heard this story, do you know why there's no t-shirts? Do you know why you don't see Benjamin Crump?
Running against wireless vacuum. Lots of attention.
Which makes him second murder conspiracy victim and attempted first-degree murder charges. People at the forefront warned of the man connected to the death of Breonna Taylor Jr. and injured his cousin Raphael Mango Jr. These documents give great details on how the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office connected each man to this case to make an arrest. Investigators explain the men are the four associates of the Six Block, and the shooting that took Allen's life was motivated to the purpose to benefit, promote, and or further the interests of the criminal gang. Allen's cousin Mango is a documented gang associate of the group ATK, according to police. Investigators say an ongoing feud between the two gangs led to the death of Charles Jones, also known as Julio Fulio, last year. Following Jones's death, Mango released a song called Six Ways to Die, featuring another rapper who police say is also a gang member of ATK. In the song, Mango disses several Six Block members who have died and
Running for your life.
members of the Six Block took at a gravesite. This brings us to the day our
Running for your life.
after the shooting took place, a witness called 911 and told them that they saw the suspects flee the scene in a black car. There, investigators began canvassing the area, recovering video from nearby businesses. Hours later, they found the suspect's car, which is a black Kia where a BMW met them after the shooting. Investigators searched the black Kia where they found a match to the spent rifle casings found at the scene. Detectives requested cell phone data from the location of the murder and where the black Kia was found. Records reveal the data showed the four suspects were at both locations. Detectives also learned that the BMW involved belonged to one of the suspects' family members. Cell phone data and video surveillance connected the four men accused of Allen's death at the scene of the shooting. DSO says more arrests could be expected in this case. For now reporting, Alicia Hatcher, Channel 4, the local station.
My sense is that this will be about de-escalation, not about the big, great deal. And that we're going to de-escalate before we can move forward.
Well, they said that they would not stop unless the reciprocal trade tariff.
Let's bring it back home. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent defended Trump's economic approach in the Wall Street Journal op-ed. He said, quote, in the first 100 days of his
We've laid the groundwork to rebalance global trade, restore America's industrial base. The American people should expect to hear solutions coming during the second half of 2025. All business moving. We're going to see more jobs, more manufacturing, more growth, and more robust national defense, higher wages, lower taxes, less burdensome regulation, cheaper energy, less national debt, less dependence on China, all while maintaining a strong dollar. Steve, I love that you ended with a strong dollar.
But these photos are going to show.
I'm only saying this once. If you don't go claim your $5,800 after this, you might as well hand in your brains because you clearly ain't using it.
Get the fuck up.
But these photos are going to show how these evil individuals, the police departments, have actually doctored the photo that you see. That's why they're not showing you the full video, and also got a call from a video specialist who has confirmed that these videos have been doctored and compressed. As you hear her say that the officer was running, and the camera's kind of choking, that's why it's blurred. No. If you go back and look at any other officer's cameras when they're running, that camera is clear as now let me just show you how they have manipulated these folks. I'm going to start with the press conference with the Sergeant of the Cincinnati Police Department for explaining that this young man was going to England at the police, but they never showed it. Watch this.
Trained to use our vehicles as cover from any threat. That's what they're trying to do.
Now you see clear dead body cam footage is. Look at how clear that body cam footage is. Now watch how it all of a sudden becomes so blurry that you can't see.
It's a body worn camera from officer number 2.
You see how when it starts, it automatically gets blurry. Watch this. And you see right there, they moved the camera so you can't see when young Ryan was shot. But I'm going to show you a photo that shows exactly when he was shot, and it was much further than the point at which they're going to show you in these pictures. Just watch this.
So just to give you an idea, we have 2 uniformed cars, we have 2 officers, 4 individuals in the stolen vehicle. All 4 individuals get out and start running, some in different directions. Officers decide which individual they're going to pursue. One officer decides to pursue the individual they now know had a firearm in his hand. The other officer pursued another occupant that fled from the vehicle, and that'll be significant here in a moment. You see. So this is a still image again on the left-hand side.
They're showing you a still image. And I'm going to show you why they're showing these still images. Now you see how blurry that still image is. You see how blurry, like you cannot even see the trees, right? You can't even see the trees. It looks like a big green blur. Let me show you this picture of it as well. You see again, you see how blurry that is. You can't even see the writing on the dumpster. Like everything is a blur. Look at the trees and everything. But I want to show you some other photos from another news clip, so they are much clearer. It shows that these photos that they are seeing, showing at the news conference, have been doctored. to address bring this ultimately to a resolution. Person inside to
His primary solution? Manipulate public opinion. He wanted the federal government to publicly promote the value of small families and to publicly shame large families. Full-on propaganda to change the values of the American people. His ultimate solution, and this is completely insane, government regulation of family size.
Given the population explosion, what ought the government do about this?
The first thing that should happen is that the president wants to say, from here on out, no intelligent, patriotic American family ought to have more than 2 children, preferably 1, if you're starting a family now. Not any law, but just say this is what responsible people do. You ought to make the FCC see to it that large families are always treated in a negative light on television wherever they appear. There ought to be a tremendous amount of television time devoted to spot commercials, the sort we've had against smoking. You get a scene which shows Los Angeles and the smog and it just says this city has a fatal disease. It's called overpopulation. So long. You could move to giving women bonuses for not having babies. That almost certainly would do the job. Then you could move to changing the tax structure. People who had the money and had the children paid for the children. In other words, you would increase taxes on people with children. If that doesn't work, then you'll have the government legislating the size of the family. And people say, oh, that's impossible. Government should never intrude and tell you how many children to have. Well, I got news. It intruded a long time ago and told you how many wives you can have. And there's not the slightest question that if we don't get the population under control with voluntary means, that in the not-too-distant future, the government will simply tell you how many children you can have and throw you in jail if you have too many.
And this was not merely academic theory. This was a coordinated effort to reduce population growth in the U.S. by any means necessary. And I feel like it worked. The U.S. birth rate has been steadily declining since about 1960. And internationally, the efforts for population control have been even more extreme. Mass abortions, forced sterilizations, China's one-child policy, even letting millions starve during famines. Yeah, that's a real thing. During the 1943 Bengal famine, British colonial administrators referenced Malthusian principles to downplay intervention, allowing millions of Indians to starve to death. William and Paul Paddock argued to permit starvation in their 1967 book, and Paul Ehrlich also argued for this in 1968. This eugenicist tactic was promoted well into the 1970s. And look into India's sterilization campaigns in the 1970s, funded by the World Bank and advised by American NGOs. This all sounds like a crazy conspiracy theory, but this is all shockingly real. And as I said, this obsession with population control is still here today. It's just been rebranded. Back then, it was overpopulation. Today, it's climate change. And climate change was kind of a funny tactic at first. Initially, in the 1970s, they said we were all going to freeze to death in the coming ice age. Then, in the 1980s, we were all going to burn to death because of global warming. And now, climate change, a nice, safe, vague term, so that whatever happens, drought, rain, heat waves, freezing cold, snowstorms, hurricanes, you name it, they can say, see, climate change. And this tactic of shifting fear narratives is not new. In fact, some of you might remember back in the 1970s and 80s, the mainstream media was constantly warning us that we're going to run out of fossil fuels within 50 years.
One of the groups involved in the CSIRO forum was the Australian Association for the Study of Peak Oil and Gas. It believes that the planet's oil production will peak in a couple of years and start going into decline.
This was everywhere. Scientists and journalists were all running around screaming
Simple.
that we were going to hit peak oil and that humanity was going to face a catastrophic energy crisis by the early 20th century. But just like with overpopulation hysteria, they made one critical mistake. They failed to account for technological advancement. Just as the Green Revolution completely transformed agriculture and prevented the mass famines that the overpopulation doomsayers were hyperventilating over, technological breakthroughs in energy completely destroyed the fossil fuel depletion narrative. we developed new technologies like fracking, horizontal drilling, and exploiting oil sands. These innovations unlocked massive new reserves of oil and natural gas, reserves that were previously thought to be completely inaccessible. And so then, the supposed fossil fuel shortage never happened. But people are not rational. Even though the fear of running out of fossil fuels faded, the global elites never stopped their hyperventilating panic. Instead, they conveniently pivoted to a new justification for restricting fossil fuel use: climate change.
Yep.
Now think about that for a second. The solution to the so-called climate crisis just happens to be, what a coincidence, a massive reduction in fossil fuel consumption. It's almost like the entire climate change movement was a bait and switch. It's almost like the real motivation wasn't about the environment at all. It's almost like it's been about overpopulation the whole time. And look, I think these alarmists, they truly believed that we were going to run out of fossil fuels back in the 1980s. So you know what? Okay, fine, I get it. I understand that a little deception felt justified. They thought that they needed to nudge the public into consuming less. They wanted to save humanity. But the predicted shortages never really materialized. The fear narrative is now obsolete. So you know what, guys? Maybe stop lying. Your little ruse is no longer necessary. But you know what? They just keep going.
Yep.
Because as I said, it's no longer just a theory. It is a religion. Consider that they always claim they're just following the science. But the science has only ever just been an effort to justify the real motivations.
Yep.
What this is really all about is finding the most emotionally effective weapon to push population control. Overpopulation was concerning. The next ice age was alarming. But both of these things, I think they seemed a little too sci-fi. They didn't really justify population control efforts in the minds of good Christians throughout the United States and Europe. But global warming, crops failing, forests eviscerated, polar bears dying, sea levels rising, cities underwater, that scared the hell out of people. And so the narrative changed. Not because the science changed, but because the fear tactic changed. The narrative does not follow the science. The science follows their narrative. And the effects of this overpopulation hysteria, now rebranded as climate change, have been absolutely devastating in a variety of ways. In fact, I think it may have even been as devastating as communism. I believe that overpopulation hysteria can be linked to not just birth rate decline throughout Western civilization, but also war, famine, the feminist movement, and the rise in the popularity of homosexuality and transgenderism. I'll explain all of this in one moment. First, of course, I have to talk about my amazing sponsor. Do you ever feel like your body's...
Man, once y'all realize that we've been lied to, until then, you'll never know the truth is in you.
Oh, hi.
You've been
I'm here
tricked
for you, boss. 100%.
out of our fucking mind to not know who the fuck is lying. Until y'all realize how simple the truth is and you be not simple-minded, you're going to realize the mind that's divine is the only thing that's behind everything. Because that's what you're supposed to be thinking with. Again, we all been taught to be stupid. Because they don't need no smart people. They don't need you thinking for yourself.
You're looking good.
They don't need you
Really?
knowing better. They need you dumbed down, believing, understanding, having faith, and hoping, and making sure that you stay stuck on stupid. But the realization is when you realize the reason why you're alive is because you were born a winner in
You're
one
looking
way
very
first
sharp,
place.
boss.
And in one way is you will never know it all. But a part of it all is you being a part of it all. Literally. The truth is in you to know already.
1798 work, an essay on the principle of population.
Gonna make some
Overpopulation hysteria has been ruminating among academics at the upper echelon of Western civilization for over 200 years. Crazy. But these ideas really gained traction in the 19th century and really surged in the 20th century, especially between the 1940s and the 1960s. This was after World War II and was probably because of economic and environmental anxieties. The eugenics movement emerged with the rise in popularity of social Darwinism, and after the works of Francis Galton on hereditary improvement were published in the 1880s. And so, overpopulation hysteria and the eugenics movement each amplified the other. There was a problem and there was a solution. Overpopulation hysteria reached its peak in the late 1960s and 70s after the publication of Paul Ehrlich's The Population Bomb in 1968. Rachel Carlson's book Silent Spring was published in 1962, igniting the modern environmental movement, as we discussed at the top of the show. And this really set the stage for the overpopulation hysteria to transition to climate hysteria. As Western civilization abandoned the Christian faith and turned more and more to atheism, people became lost. They no longer took seriously the idea that they had a duty to God. They no longer followed any strict set of moral principles, and they lost their sense of purpose. And so people felt a compulsion to fill that emptiness with a new purpose, a new religion. And saving the planet was perfectly positioned to become that new religion. But before that, because everyone was in a panic about overpopulation, a number of organizations had formed to combat this perceived global catastrophe. And again, this sounds like crazy conspiracy theory fiction, but this is all real. Planned Parenthood, the UN Fund for Population Activities, Rockefeller and Ford Foundations, Population Council, the Club of Rome, and get this, USAID. These were all founded to address fears about overpopulation. Also, the Gates Foundation, the WHO, the IMF, and the World Bank all eventually became involved in reducing the world population as well.
This is a map of the development of International Planned Parenthood. So you'll see it started with the American Birth Control League, the Birth Control Federation of America. Here you have Carola Wurber Rothschild. Here's Margaret Sanger, who was part of all of them. By the 1950s, other organizations are starting to get involved, particularly at the UN. What was created, particularly looking at the population issue, was something called the Draper Committee. USAID is formed as a result of the Draper Committee. These are people who are industrialists, are high-ranking military officials, are part of Skull and Bones. You have other people who were part of the Rockefeller Foundation, the Atlantic Institution, members of the Council on Foreign Relations, Monsanto Chemical Corporations, the Brookings Institutions, people who were a part of NATO. This is the military-industrial complex. We're also part of International Planned Parenthood and the Population Crisis Committee. This is a eugenics society.
The primary strategy for resolving the overpopulation issue has been to reduce population growth, and that means stopping people from having kids. And some methods for doing this have been drastic. Not only that, but many of these organizations have accumulated a lot of power, way more than you might expect. And we have seen the stuff that Doge has been uncovering lately. And so basically, a lot of these NGOs, nonprofit organizations that get money from, like, USAID, they've essentially been turned into grift machines and money laundering operations. They just redirect U.S. tax money into the pockets of corrupt politicians and bureaucrats, and of course, they're still trying to reduce the population. But domestically in the U.S., I actually think that the most effective method by which they were able to reduce the population was cultural. It was from Hollywood. For a while there, in the 1990s, just about every movie directly used climate change in their plot or directly cited it in some way. But at the same time, they were indirectly trying to manipulate people to stop having kids. Before the 1990s, big families were fairly typical in films and movies. Think about The Sound of Music, The Brady Bunch, The Waltons, 8 is Enough, Little House on the Prairie. I looked up big families on TV in the 90s, and there were a few. The biggest was from a show called Seventh Heaven. But family sizes were definitely trending down by the 1990s. And so now I did some research on TV shows today, and get this, in 2025, aside from reality shows, there are 0 large families on television. Now, there is apparently one sitcom on Netflix called The Upshaws. This is about a black family with 4 kids. That's about it. Today, cool characters in Hollywood films or TV shows, they rarely have any siblings or children. Parents with kids are often depicted as miserable, whilst childless couples are romanticized. And this Hollywood propaganda has been extremely effective. As I said before, the U.S. birth rate has been steadily declining since 1960. But Hollywood's attempt to terrorize the world into halting procreation started far earlier, particularly in the science fiction of the 1960s and 1970s. Take Soylent Green, for example. This dystopian classic imagines a future where Earth is so overcrowded and resources are so depleted that people are literally being turned into food. The line, Soylent Green is people, became one of the most famous lines in film history, and it was directly inspired by overpopulation hysteria.
Listen, you gotta tell them, Soylent Green is people. We gotta stop them somehow.
And then you had Logan's Run, where anyone over the age of 30 was executed in order to preserve resources.
When this turns to black, that's it. But if for some strange reason you want to be 31, then you have the same chance as everyone else.
Or THX 1138. This was George Lucas's dystopian film where reproduction was completely controlled by the state.
What's wrong? Take 4 capsules in 10 minutes. Take 2 more. Help is on the way.
Even Blade Runner takes place in a world ravaged by environmental decay and overpopulation. The Mad Max films, Waterworld, The Day After Tomorrow, Elysium, Snowpiercer, The Book of Eli, Interstellar, all of these take place in a dystopian future caused by overpopulation, resource depletion, or climate change. And you know what? I actually love some of these films. Certainly some of these stories, they're simply using overpopulation or resource depletion or climate change as a convenient plot device, copying it maybe from other authors. Overpopulation or resource depletion are even things that I can imagine writing into some of my own stories. But when you get to the root of this overpopulation plot device, it's always influenced by real overpopulation alarmists. It always stems from real warnings and real fears. So whether the screenwriters and directors and producers intended it or not, these films are not just entertainment. They are propaganda. Hollywood has been indoctrinating audiences with the idea that too many people equals death and suffering for decades. They have been conditioning us all to believe that humanity itself is.
The conditioning part is believing. Because that condition right there stops you from thinking. I'm just saying. It's time to us wake up from the game. I'm Mr. Gas 48. Part 1. You can get the rest of it right after this.